Ladies and gentlemen, we will start our debate session in 1 minute. Yeah?
Oh, you need more paper? I want you. I don't want to be recorded, can I? This is harder because you can't keep it. No.
The panel of distinguished adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to all of you who are present today in the Royal Malaysian University Debating Championship 2023. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ainaiddina binti Shahrul Nizam, and I will be the speaker for this round. Without further ado, let us begin our debate session now. I will start first by introducing all the debaters that will share out their arguments and suggestions for today's motion. Representing the government team, I would like to welcome Ms. Ain as the Prime Minister, Mr. Woon as the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Brandon as the Government Whip, and the reply speech will be delivered by Mr. Woon. Next, representing the opposition team, I would like to welcome Ms. Camilla as the Leader of Opposition, Mr. Him as the Deputy Leader of Opposition, Ms. Gauri as the Opposition Whip, and the reply speech will be delivered by Mr. Him. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now introduce the distinguished adjudicators for this round. Please welcome the first adjudicator, Mr. Thbt, the second adjudicator, Ms. Gauri, and the third adjudicator, Mr. Nyon Arif. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pretty sure that all of you have understood the ground rules for every debate session. However, please allow me to humbly remind all of us of the rules and regulations that need to be adhered to as follows. During the debate, please silence your mobile phone or any device that may produce disturbing sounds. For substantive speech sessions, the bell will ring once at the first and the 6th minute. At the 7th minute, the bell will ring twice. For the reply speech session, the bell will ring once, at the 3rd minute and twice, at the 4th minute. Ladies and gentlemen, please be informed that the motion for today's debate is: this House believes that Asian countries should adopt an open border labor migration policy. To open the debate, I would like to call upon the Prime Minister from the government team, Ms. Ain, to propose the motion. Please welcome.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Asia being the regional grouping that it is, it has played a central role in ancient economic integration in terms of negotiation and trade. But at the end of the day, are we really using it to the fullest? On today's debate, we propose an open border labor migration among the Asian countries, and this is what the policy would look like. Firstly, three things. Firstly, we're making the application easy, as simple as an online application. The people who want to work in Asian country has an employment letter in order for them to get a visa. Secondly, employees' welfare will be covered by the employees themselves. And thirdly, this policy is applied for all the Asian countries. Now we tell you why this policy would work. Firstly, it's because we are encouraging exchange of labor in between Asian countries rather than exporting other foreign workers to the country. For example, like Bangladesh and India, although they are what we see in most in Malaysia right now. At the same time, it's not really beneficial for the Asian economics itself because there's no healthy integration within the Asian labor workers. In terms of Asian labor workers in the current status quo. And then secondly, we tell you that it will work because for all Asian, this will be a healthy exchange in relation among Asian countries in terms of economic. And we tell you this because there will be an increase in economic status for all Asian, and this will because they will start working together. We think that once this policy passed and people go to the countries that they want to work with, Asians want to go to the country that they want to work with Asians. In the end of the day, each of the Asian country will benefit because there will be taxation systems of each country, and they will gain benefit to this in enhancing the economic status in the Asian. Now let's go back to why is there a need of this policy in the first place. So look at the problems in status quo. There are three problems in the status quo right now in terms of Asia. Firstly is the influx problem of illegal worker. And it's not being combated at all because at the end of the day, these people who bring illegal worker to not pay for extra fees, like visa and tax all. And this is a problem right now, and it's not being combated well. And then second, it's very hard for the workers in Asia and all foreign workers to come work in Asian because of visa problem. Again, they ask for a lot of things. Even though we're Asians, we should be comfortable with each other. They still ask a lot of things, and you're treated badly in these countries, and then at the end of the day, it's a very long process and it's very tiring process. And then thirdly, there is an overwhelming labor shortage in the current status quo, and this is a problem. Why? Because Asia is a developing country with heavy emphasis on production. We clearly need this labor. At the same time, we're not properly utilizing it to benefit us Asians. Labor shortage is very prominent in Asian and all in Asian, and we are really heavily reliant on the labor to fund the economy. We've seen this in Malaysia, we've seen this in Indonesia, and so with our proposition, we tell you that in the end of the day, we will benefit the economic status of Asian. Why? Because we're telling you that because at the end of the day, this policy will cater healthy relationship within each Asian. So, which goes to my first argument on why this open policy will benefit the country. Firstly, is fostering between relationship for a regional group that aims to promote economic and security cooperation among the numbers. Clearly, we have seen that it's not being emphasized enough that. It's not being emphasized enough that in the Asian we haven't taken enough chance in developing our countries in a more efficient way, which is through labor worker, right? Just imagine if we as Asians start taking more labor workers with each other's Asian, wouldn't that generate better economic at the end of the day? And we are telling you so because at the end of the day, the people who benefit is the Asian people and the Asian people itself, including our economy. And then we tell you that and we tell you that it will strengthen our economy. It will strengthen the Asian status as the it will strengthen the Asian status in the world, because as we are becoming a more economical power, as we are utilizing the best that we can using Asian's country itself. And with that, we are telling you that there will be better fostering relationship at the same time while we are bringing an increase in the economic status of Asians. And I'll take any POIs. And then at the same time, we also will, at the same time, the problem with status quo, it will also be fixed, because we are giving them a chance to work in Asian country. For example, as Malaysian, I want to work in Singapore, but it might be easy for me, but it might be easy and it might be hard, and we don't understand why is it so hard and why is it so easy. We're Asians at the first place, and we're not utilizing properly this. We're not utilizing this benefit that we have as Asian in terms of labor. When I'm going there to do my work, but I have to apply to so many things, and at the end of the day, I might not even be able to work in the country because my application failed. And this has been an ongoing issue. So on our side of the world, at least we are trying to make it easy, and we are even encouraging a more healthy economic exchange in terms of labor with the Asian country itself. We are making it easy, as we've said, that application will be made easy as long as there is a working visa. So with that, we tell you to side government, because at the end of the day, we bring more benefit to Asian in terms of economy, as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chan Minister. Up next, I would like to invite the Leader of Opposition, Ms. Camilla, to present your arguments. Please welcome.
Yeah, timer.
Can I set my own timer? Right, thanks.
Never this one supposed to be on. Actually,
My bad, got excited. Anyways, I'm sorry. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Side government talks about all these interesting impacts where economical growth, they get economical growth, they get better relations, without actually showing. Not only without actually showing the road mapping towards it, but also not actually defining how exactly do these open border policies work. But before that, the burden of side opposition is to prove why adopting these open border labor migration policies is not in the best interest of ASEAN, the community of ASEAN countries. So 3 questions. What is the nature and interest of ASEAN countries? So these ASEAN countries are good at production. Because they produce a lot of they give a lot of product, right? They provide a market for each other when they're within like ASEAN. So this means lower tax rates and lower tariffs. So we agree that with side government that they prioritize economical growth, but that is more tangible on our side. And second, but I will prove that in my speech later. Secondly, what does an open border labor migration policy look like? So this is where side government wrongly characterized it. Side government characterized it as people having visas, when in truth, open border policies actually don't need documentation. The whole point of open border policies is that the border here is the laws, the visa, the documentation that these workers require to actually go outside of the country. But when we open these borders, means that they don't need this documentation. People actually don't know where these workers are going. They can just go outside the country and work wherever they want. So that's the missing characterization from side government. So this actually looks like people moving freely within ASEAN for work without documentation. So third, so how does this not align with the interests of ASEAN countries? So we need to emphasize on the debilitating effects of this. People are when there's no documentation and no secure way of tracking these workers and where they go, there's less security towards these workers and the countries that accept these workers, and their stagnation happens in the long run. So why it's good to not adopt this policy? So countries will actually be able to make jobs for their own people. This creates an incentive for people to stabilize their own country. And how it leads to the interests of ASEAN? Well, the true comparative of this debate is convenience. convenience versus sustainability. Side government pushes for convenience, as in they want to allow these workers to be able to. When there's so many workers in like one country, this country can just push these workers to like whatever country, done, job creation. But on our side, we prefer more sustainability, where these countries are able to actually fix their own economical problems. So moving on to my first argument. Pressure on countries to provide more jobs. The reasoning is the labor force often comes from countries with poor management of job opportunities. So there's so many people in one country. For example, Indonesia, there's so many people within the country that have the labor force, but they don't have the jobs within that country. So they have so many workers. There's no jobs, and this leads to labor workers having to look for work outside of countries. So with these open border policies, these countries can simply let go of these workers without any consequence. So why exactly is this bad? These workers deserve proper rights and protection, and it's more likely when they work in their own country that knows their interests the best, where they can meet their family, where they can speak to their coworkers in their own language. So for these countries to actually care, they require accountability towards these job creation problems, and only then these workers will get the rights that they deserve without having to fly around within ASEAN just to feed their family. So sure, side government might argue that okay, just to feed their family, right? That's the point of job creation, having to like go outside of these countries. But why is that bad? So moving on to my second argument, exploitation. So exploitation is more likely to happen on their side, because without proper documentation, it's harder for governments to actually track where these workers are going, how are the condition of these workers, or whether their rights are being taken care of by their employers or not. So without documentation, these workers, sure, it's easier for them to find jobs, but it's harder for the people on top to actually know whether they're doing okay in their jobs. Yeah. These open border policies actually leave these workers to go into a jungle full of dangers on their own. So the impacts that come from side opposition is one, job creation, two, reducing this exploitation, because on our side, while we still have documentation visa, these employers at the very least, they know where their workers are going. The government are able to track whether these employers are actually treating their workers well, and these workers have a place to like complain when their employers are not treating them well. And thirdly, economical growth. So how are these impacts tangible? One, job creation. So to put a comparative, on side government, it doesn't happen because these countries will have no incentive to create jobs for their people. So even if they get jobs outside, there's less of a guarantee for safety and protection of rights. I already mentioned about how job creation is more tangible on our side. Secondly, exploitation. On side government, it's more likely on their side because it's harder to keep track of workers, plus having to keep track of workers coming from the outside. So not only that governments within the country have to keep track of like workers going outside of their country, they will have to keep track of workers coming from outside of their country into their country as well. And thirdly, economical growth. So this is like the main point, the main objective of ASEAN, right? So now that there is an incentive for countries to manage their own job creation, this leads to more sustainability because it highlights issues within countries. It highlights the issue of job creation. So open borders will be convenient, but then this leads to dependence, stagnation, and further polarization. Dependence because these developed countries will be dependent on these developing countries on like providing workers for them without actually training their own people to work for the jobs that they need. Secondly, stagnation. So stagnation because there's no incentive to improve their own system. So with more accountability towards internal economical problems, the effort to improve ASEAN's economy as a whole falls on every ASEAN country and not just the more developed countries to provide jobs for these developing countries with an overflow of workers. Thirdly, further polarization. So you wouldn't want to be known as the country with like migrant workers. You want these people to actually have their own identity, be more accepted within their own country. This is less likely to happen on side government side because they will have to go to outside countries who will see them only as labor workers, will see them as less than human, and this further reduces the rights of them of being human. On side government, you support the reduction of the rights of these workers. On side opposition, you support their rights, you support their job creation, and you support the improvement of the economical growth of ASEAN. With that, support side opposition.
Thank you. Now, I would like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister from the government team, Mr. Woon, to continue proposing the motion. Please welcome.
Guys, give me a moment, I'm drinking water. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Opposition wants to keep telling you about how, on their side, right, on their side, the workers will be treated better and all the like, and the such, right? But before we even get into that in the first place, allow me to say that they are completely trying to slanderize and mischaracterize our entire our characterization. Please note that in the motion, the word open border is stated with quotations because it will never be without that said quotations. It is not a completely permeable barrier that can go through. What we are saying as government is that we are lowering said barriers so that these people can get into the places that they need to get to work easier. We have not stated. Stop. Right. So what we have characterization is that because we know that we have stated that getting work permits is very, very hard, right? So the difficulty, that barrier of entry is very, very high. And what we're saying is that by adopting these open borders with quotation marks, this labor migration policy is that it reduces the barrier to entry so that people can actually feed their families, because that's what they want in the first place. That is why migrant workers go to the other countries to work in the first place. They want to feed their family, and they felt that they might have a chance in the other countries, right? In addition, right, in addition, I would like to add that so the government is trying to paint that that because there is an open border, that when open border, when you allow migrant companies to go inside these countries, right, that they will be mistreated, right? They'll be treated less than human and the such. And when we have stated that no, the welfare of the employee is covered by the employer. The employer is still responsible. We're not saying that, oh, employers, you have a free pass, just abuse these people whenever you like. No, you are saying that when you lower the barrier of entry, when you have proper documentation, when you have proper documentation and you can track where these people go to, you can actually take the steps forward to ensure the well-being of the workers. And they're also trying to say that because it's their home country, right? They know the best, right? They know the best is that of their interest in the people, right? And that of course they will take care of that employees in their home country will take care of their employees. That is not something that's mutual to a home country. Countries from other, like the companies in other countries can still care, right? It is still a law everywhere that you don't exploit and abuse your workers, right? That is something that ASEAN shares. And as a whole, they are trying to deny what the ASEAN itself is trying to do in the first place, which is to develop as a whole, as a unity, as the region, as the association of Southeast Asian nations as a whole, not just individual outliers who are outstanding in their economy. No, we want to develop it as a whole, and that by using this slightly more permeable barrier that you are allowed to this more permeable barrier is that you can you are able to just share your labor and your skilled workers amongst the entire regions and not just to selected few countries, right? So, and I would like to add to our point on government, why it will reduce the illegal migrant workers is like purely it can combat corruption, right? So you do not have under the table, underhanded deals of people trying to buy their way to work visas, right? And through to different countries, right? And in addition, you can also the host company, right, where the host country where these migrant workers are going to, right? The country itself can actually do taxation properly, because what these migrant workers are going to, they have the documentation, they are tracked. So the taxation, right, for the welfare services or food services or any other services that they go through, they can actually be taxed for that, rather than being off the books, off the record, and they are not accounted for. Right. In addition, it also reduces mistreatment purely because the documentation is there. Right. You have the paperwork, you have the proof. It's black and white that this person is employed under this employer, and the visa and the permit and all that. Right. So making sure more people have that. Yes, you may.
Okay, so if in your world it's going to be easier to enter, how the hell does documentation actually work in your world?
Documentation works as it always been, as a proof of your employment, as a proof of the thing. It works because you have the documentation to prove, you have the works, you have the proof that you are here, that you are being tracked by the government, and that you are entitled to some of the benefits that the country say they might provide. Right. In addition, right. So what you also reduce is that you will reduce the number of illegal immigrants in the country, because you do not have these companies trying to undercut the competition by exploiting foreign labor that is working under them, that is living in inhuman conditions, right? So that they can undercut their competition, they can charge lower, and they are causing more misery in the first place, right? And reaping all the rewards. In our world, we're saying that because this open border has a lower barrier of entry, because they have this documentation, this prevents state exploitation of unrecorded migrant workers, and in the end, it will bring a benefit to all as ASEAN as a whole, not just select countries that are the outstanding, the outliers right now in ASEAN. That is all from me. I rest my case.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. Up next, I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition, Mr. Hill, to present your arguments. Please welcome.
Right, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. To simply understand what an open border policy means, we need to look into the type of integration ASEAN is and what are integrations. As an economic student, let me lecture you about what are economic integrations. Very simple. ASEAN started off as a free trade area, right? And now they're moving towards achieving economic integration. What is ASEAN's goal? Like my first speaker mentioned, it's economic integration. Yes, you can say more workers can improve. I'll attack on that later. But now, the goal, when it comes to open border, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean to lower the barrier of entry, because how do you lower the barrier of entry? But you can just work with your passport. It doesn't work like that way. When we talk about open border, it comes into a different level of integration, which is called the political union, which the greatest example of political union is the EU, right? And the EU, the European Union, and we talk about EU, yes, they can move freely without documentation. So I don't understand what you want to go about saying that it's just because it's quoted, so it's not really open border, it's just lowering the borders. So that's nonsense. All right, when it comes to the next part, when it comes to, I mentioned, so the next thing I want to talk about is how, let's say we want to talk about ASEAN moving into a political union, for example, in this case, right? Let's talk about that. And why is it so difficult for ASEAN to move into this? It's because number one, politically, all these countries are different. Second, a lot of cultures are different. Third, when you move in these countries, the most important is the currency, all right? That's very difficult. So I'll go straight into my arguments, right? The first argument I'll talk about, extending from my first speaker, was job creation will be more likely on our side. It's quite funny how on site government you mentioned, the whole case is that when you open borders, suddenly ASEAN's population will double, which is, because on your side you mentioned how when you open the border, suddenly all the jobs will be filled and everyone has jobs and all these kind of things, which I think is wrong. So on our side, what we say is that the issue with open borders is that people can move freely without any regulations, right? And when we restrict and allow migration, as what is happening at the moment, people can still move freely in the sense, but they need to have documentation, which is recorded and which is checked, which is much more safe on our side. And I'll explain how does it prevent exploitation. Next, the thing is that, like you said, there are a lot of jobs that are not being filled. Yes, you can say migrants can still move over legally without the need of having open borders, and these jobs can still be filled. Next thing is that I want to say, it's not good to, you're not supposed to put a responsibility to find income. You're not supposed to put a responsibility of finding income on other countries' governments. So, for example, like you said, on your side, if you say open the borders, countries with a large population, for example, Indonesia, they could be complacent and say that, because now it's open borders, I don't have to find jobs. It's hard for them. There's no incentive for them to create jobs and improve the livelihood because because the country would think that these people can just migrate to Malaysia, migrate to Singapore, migrate to Thailand just to find jobs, which is wrong. So on our side, we've proved to you how how we're able to protect both the lesser developed countries and also the more developed countries. In this sense, because number one, when we talk about lesser developed countries, for example, with large populations, it is better for us to not have this open border policy, is because countries who have, like I mentioned, countries who have more incentive to for job creation. One of the good example is, for example, Vietnam. Now the status quo is that we don't have an open border, but Vietnam has find ways, because they know their labor is cheap, and they have found ways to invite large corporations from US, for example, Apple, Coca-Cola, to come in to create these jobs for them. And if they're able to create these jobs for them, that's a better incentive, because they don't have the people there now, like we mentioned, they're protected in their own country, and they can find jobs in their own country without having to go over. Next thing I want to talk about, when we talk about the differences in these countries, right, it's very difficult for us to understand. One very good thing I mentioned about tax, right? When we talk about tax, when these workers move freely around countries, which country receive the payment? Who do these people pay the tax to? We don't know. It's hard for us to calculate. It's hard for us, and you didn't let us know what is the scale, what is the metric to this. And it's important because you understand that the difference of ASEAN is so big, because there are countries which is developed, for example Singapore, and there are countries which are so underdeveloped, like Laos, right? And because of this country, because of this difference, it's hard for these people to know who gets more tax, because Laos would want more tax, but Singapore also want more tax, they want money, right? So it's the agreement to come. That's why they talk about political union. When we talk about political union, countries will come in together and have the same laws and regulations. And because of that, these countries cannot. It's impossible for them because of the differences in the economy. And because of the differences in the economy, they're unable to actually come together. Next thing I'll talk about is the safety of ASEAN will be protected. Safety of ASEAN countries will be protected in our side. And I'll talk about safety. I'll give an example. The Philippines are claiming Sabah as their own now, right? When you open these borders, the likelihood of these countries coming in to claim this land as their own is so high on your side. On our side, we're able to at least mitigate this by at least not letting people just come in to take over our land, right? It's so simple. So again, once these borders are open, the likelihood of like the Sulu Sultanate would come in and try to take over Sabah, right? And that thing, okay? The next thing I'll talk about is protection of people, exploitation. Yes, exploitation happens on our side also. And yes, you're right, there are illegal immigrants. But the thing is, illegal immigrants don't only come from ASEAN. Illegal immigrants come from all around the world, like Bangladesh, Nepal, all these kind of countries as well. So for you to say that it doesn't happen on your side is false, because even if you open borders in ASEAN, countries like Bangladesh, Nepal would still have all these illegal immigrants. Okay, moving on. We talk about open border. Like we said, you are unable to keep track of who is coming into your nation, and you're unable to protect these people because you don't know who are there, and just everyone's just running around. For example, Indonesia suddenly just has an influx of people coming to Malaysia, and you don't know how to protect these people. But on our side, at least, immigrants that come in, we know who are they with a recorded visa, passport, all those kind of things. They're recorded, we know who are in, and we have laws and regulations in place for these people to actually be protected under the law. And yes, you can say that even with laws, people will still be exploited, correct? But that happens anyway. So what the government has to do is probably come with better laws, come with better regulations, right? But that's not part of the debate today. All right, next thing is I'll talk about again is talk about the money, right? Going to tax. It's difficult for us because political union countries need to decide what amount or who gets the tax, right? And like I mentioned again, to go back, is that the differences in economic status will lead to downfall of ASEAN. The next I'm going to talk about rebuttals, right? The first thing I say was increase in economic status, from the government, right? Increase in economic status for all ASEAN. But the thing is, people want to work wherever they want to work. So their own countries, people will leave their countries and they don't work within the country, so the country will not have money. Yeah, okay, so when, for example, if let's say a country with all people, suddenly they leave the country, just work anywhere else within ASEAN. Like I mentioned just now, the country within themselves would die because like no one wants to work there if the country is poor and they have no jobs there. So for example, like all Malaysians want to work in Singapore because the pay is good, right? And if all Malaysians go into Singapore, I think Malaysia would die because there's no jobs and nothing happens in Malaysia. Next thing you talk about is overwhelming labour shortage, like I mentioned just now, how suddenly if you open borders, suddenly the population would double, right? How do you solve this labour shortage when you open the borders, right? If shortage, even if you open borders ASEAN, it won't improve. The number of population in ASEAN would still be the same. You open one side will have more people, the other side will still be empty. Right? Okay? And as well, you just open borders to the whole world like that if you want influx into ASEAN, right? Which is why we say that we want to ensure that these borders are not open so that we are able to first, number one, protect the people, number two, ensure that our employees and ensure the safety of all ASEAN countries and all ASEAN members are protected. With that, I wrote this down, vote for work visa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Oh my God, I got a reply.
Moving on, I would like to call upon the government with Mr. Brandon to continue proposing the motion on behalf of the government. Please welcome.
Good one, man.
Thank you. That's what people hold, yeah.
had an opening line, but I don't think I'm going to use it because I think the motion today has changed to this House believes that ASEAN should become the EU. ASEAN will never become the EU. I don't know why we have had to clarify the motion so many times, because what they are debating on is basically having an open border for the entirety of Southeast Asia. They are saying that, oh, you take your passport, you are free to go wherever. Whereas we are talking about an open labour migration policy. How many of you know how hard it is to actually obtain a proper work permit, a proper work visa? None of us in this room probably have had to do it. Maybe some of you, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but it is not easy. It is not an easy process. What we want to do here is, as said by the side, my Prime Minister, and it was brought up in the POI, is how your documentations work, is because we need documentation right now because we want to track a labour migration policy. We're not saying that I can go right now into Singapore without my passport. That's not going to happen. South ASEAN is not the EU. We are not going to make ASEAN the EU in today's debate. What we are doing is we want the benefit of ASEAN, and that is what our side is debating on. We are debating on the benefit of ASEAN to make it a better place so that you have more workers. And let me just address their entirety of their case, and let me go from leader of opposition and up to Diallo. Alright, so they talked about, oh, ASEAN provides a market for each other, which is true. ASEAN does provide a market for each other, but what they said is, oh, if we allow people to go around for jobs then your country will not have job creation. And their side is basically making the entirety of ASEAN EU again, because you're saying, oh, everyone is going to just flag to one country and that country is neglected or put aside. If you essentially want to be oh, so now I will become like Greece, I am bankrupt, I'm just going to borrow money from my neighboring nations within the EU. That is what you're proposing. Whereas on our side, what we have told you is we are able to address so many issues because of this open border labour migration policy, not an open border migration policy. I can't just walk into Singapore today. Alright? No, sit down, please. Alright, so they have talked about how open borders lead people into dangers, and we have also countered that in my second speaker's speech, where he talked about how because it is so hard to obtain a work permit that people have to come in illegally. Yes, you talked about people, the second speaker came up and talked about how illegal immigrants will keep coming in from Bangladesh and Nepal. Yes, the problem will not be completely eliminated, but it's less likely on our side of the world to have illegal immigrants not coming in from ASEAN, because at least now it is easier for these people to come in. Now these people are accounted for properly, so now these people are able to, the country is able to actually track these people, and you're asking us where is the tax going to go? It's a very simple question. Where the floor is working, that's the place where the tax is going to go. You're going to pay the guy tax to sit down. Alright, next. You talked about how, the differences in economy will ruin the border and taking over Sabah and stuff like that. That is, again, not going to happen because you're not talking about an open border just to walk again. Your entirety of their case is debating on having an open border. I can walk into anywhere. I can take my gun and walk into anywhere and conquer the entirety of ASEAN. That's what they're talking about here today. Alright, what else did they say? Oh, they talked about the growth of a country and how we are going to be stagnated if we allow an easier open border migration policy. I'm going to just flip it very easily and say that when you have an open border migration policy like ours, like what we have proposed, you are now actually able to create better job opportunities in the country, because now you are able to get better pool of workers to fill in that labour shortage. Whatever country that wants to develop now, people always want jobs. There's always the need for jobs. There's never been a situation where people say, oh, there's an abundance of jobs. There's always need for jobs. It's just that you need people to fill in those roles. And now if a country wants to develop this, they can at least easily obtain that resources, that manpower to actually obtain that job. And they're talking about how, there will be suddenly an overpopulation. No, we are actually helping combat that overpopulation problem within certain countries. Like Indonesia is being overpopulated. You're actually helping them combat, because now you're giving Indonesian people work and you're giving them employment opportunities within the other countries of ASEAN without having them to go through such big hassles of having to get whatever permits or whatever not they need. Alright, and they talked about culture, which I really think is not really relevant in today's debate, because ASEAN is Southeast Asia. A majority of people, exclude maybe the Indian and Chinese immigrants, most of you look the same. Most of us here look the same. Most of us, although we have similarities in culture, religious difference, yes, but cultures within the Southeast Asian region does have its similarities. All right, so with their logic of becoming an EU, turning ASEAN into an EU, basically what they're saying is like a poor. Let me quote him. He said a poor country like Laos. All right, so they are basically saying that Laos will become like Greece, bankrupt, and then they would borrow money, but that is not happening in ASEAN. All right, so let me tell you why on side government we deserve to win today. It's because we have addressed the problem of the labor shortage. We have told you that on our side, now you are able to help the neighboring countries have better employment opportunities, which in turn is better for ASEAN as a whole because you get to foster better relationships within the ASEAN region. You get to foster better relationships as in ASEAN gets to work with each other and you're able to now foster better relationships within countries, and as a region you are able to develop entirely. So that is what the end goal is, because you want ASEAN to develop as a whole. And we have also talked about the reduce of illegal migrant workers, the reduce of corruption, taxation, which was addressed on by my second speaker, because on their side, that is still going to happen. Illegal people coming in is still going to happen. At least on our side, we now have reduced number of illegal migrant workers coming in. Yes, they did say that, oh, people are still going to come in from Bangladesh. It is true, but at least now on our side, that number is significantly reduced. So you have a reduced rate of crime. You have a reduced rate of, mistreating migrant workers, because like suddenly you have employers mistreating them. You take away their humanitarian rights because these people are not accounted for. These people are illegally working in one country, so the employer can just abuse them physically, mentally, not pay them. At least now on our side, we actually care for the welfare of these people, for the welfare of these workers, and you are now able to at least help these groups who are oppressed. You are now able to help them and help ASEAN grow together as a whole. With that, side government, and I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Government Whip. Moving on, I would like to invite the opposition whip, Ms. Gauri, to present your arguments. Please welcome.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. But no, I think as another economic student, right, I think it's so convenient for government to just come up here and nitpick certain things coming out from our side of the case, right? But here, understand this. Government has the entire case is just completely taken down from the fact that they misunderstood the debate as a whole. We're talking about adopting an open border, and if we really want to take coming out from Deputy Prime Minister with the air quotations, right? An open border is characterized by both Cammy and him already means anyone from inside ASEAN can legally go in and out without anyone having to stop them or taking them for verification without any documentation. So anything coming up from their side saying that on their side they need the legal documentation doesn't necessarily exist, because with an open border legal labor migration policy, right, you don't need documentation. That's why on our end we don't need this open border labor migration policy. We need this documentation to happen. So first thing, okay, the true comparative of this debate, right, is talking about already on which side, right, who actually gets the sustainability and in the true interest of ASEAN nations, okay? Government wants to, okay, even if we take government's case completely of the entire thing from this debate, right, was that they want it to be easy because it's easier to just go inside these kind of nations, right, because we just want to get jobs. That's convenient. They're conveniently coming up and say, okay, it's easier for us to just come in and get jobs because our country is shit and we don't really want to get this, we don't really want to work here, right? But it's not sustainable in the long run because they're ditching the entire country. Again, migration, and they're trying to say that us, on our side, we're trying to say that migration is bad. We've never once come up here and told you that migration is bad. We still think migration is good. People should go out of the nation and work, okay, in other nations. But we still think it's better to do it with legal laws that already exist in status quo, okay? We want sustainability. We want these current lesser developed nations in ASEAN to hold themselves out for longer, okay? Cammy came up and already told you, okay? Like, we already told you, like, sustainability is more acceptable, is more achievable, right? Through job creations, right? Because these nations are already held responsible, they're held accountable to themselves, right, to create jobs. Government has not accepted. They have not proposed or come out with a counter argument against this as to how on their end they're actually going to create more job opportunities on their end, because on their side, right, on their side, migrant workers are still going to find job opportunities outside in other ASEAN nations, because they're not necessarily going to go back towards their original nation, because they don't have an incentive to go back. They already found job opportunities, they have an incentive to just stay in these nations in the first place. They can apply for PR there. So why do they have an incentive to go back? So these other nations don't necessarily have a need, because when you migrate, right, the whole point of you migrating to another nation, right, is for you to send back money to your parents or your families back there, so they have a need for you to for the money to be circulated back there in a way, right? So they don't necessarily, so in a way these lesser what's it again? Okay, so like these lesser developed ASEAN nations, right, still get some sort of money generated, even though it's not a lot, it's still some money generated, right? So they don't necessarily have an incentive to still create more job opportunities or like to expand on job creation. They're not creating a safety net towards the people right there who don't get the opportunity to actually migrate. So what about the people who are still staying there? They're not taking care of them. Again, not sustainable. Government has not come out and talk about why it's like, or understand why sustainability is going to be achievable. Next, government whip is so convenient to come up here and just nitpick certain cases coming up of him, right? About how the ASEAN is going to be the EU. We already told you, right? The whole point of an open border labor migration policy, it would look like how the EU looks like, which is a political union, right? Again, a political union is not in the incentive or the interest of ASEAN nations. They don't understand what is the interest of ASEAN nations, which is of economical growth. Okay, Cammy already told you like what's the importance of economical growth. The whole point is for them to come together as a whole, and they think that ASEAN nations are like one individual nation, but it's a fact that it's a part of a bunch of whole other nations brought together. So in fact, even though it's like in the interest of the ASEAN as a whole, it still has their own individual interest as is. So they still have to come up and fight for their own rights. So they can't necessarily come in and say like, okay, you know what, just because we're in ASEAN, I'm going to agree to whatever your political beliefs are, just because I want to give in. It's not necessarily like that. ASEAN doesn't work like that. ASEAN is for the main thing of ASEAN is the main thing for ASEAN is specifically for economical growth. Political union cannot necessarily work in that because it's not their incentive. They don't have a need to do it because they're not exactly like the EU. They don't have a symmetry to work on for them to actually move forward with that. So it wouldn't necessarily work. An open border policy wouldn't necessarily work. And the thing is, right, the thing is, right, the trade-off we're willing to take, right, is the fact that illegal immigration will exist. But the thing is, right now in status quo, illegal immigration will always exist, and that's the thing. There's already laws right now, right, to overcome this kind of to overcome illegal immigration. So there's always ways to overcome it. On-site government, right, it's going to be harder to overcome illegal immigration, right, on our end, because like sure it's a bit more difficult, but at least we still have the laws. It's still there. It exists right now. It's not really necessarily a trade-off. It's just something that exists. It's in status quo. We just accept it as is, right? Another thing, right? Like I mentioned, right? Government just want to say that it's really easier to a government has not come up and say, right, how on their end, right, it's going to be easier, even if you want to take on their best case side. PM came up and said, like, why it's easier because it's going to foster relationships. They don't understand the ASEAN as a whole, right? They already have the economic growth, they already have the economic relationships, because the whole point of ASEAN, again, is to have that free trade. They have that free trade. So at least, they have that kind of relationship as is. When you have even if you have an open border policy, right, it's going to create a lot of tensions, because you're going to allow for other people to just dump in a way, allow for the people to be dumped inside other developing nations, because they're going to allow for them to just, it's going to allow them to like find a way to just like create money for example, if Indonesian workers were to, find a way to make money in Malaysia and then send it back to Indonesia. Indonesia gets that revenue. Malaysia doesn't necessarily get the revenue. They get more production, but what is the cost of production if Malaysia doesn't get the revenue from the production? Yeah. Malaysia doesn't get anything in return. So in the end, it doesn't even work in the best case of Malaysia. It just works in the best case of Indonesia. There is no such thing as production, right? If it doesn't come in there is no such thing. There's no such thing as the best case of production if the revenue doesn't even go back to the main country as is. So it doesn't necessarily work in the best case of Malaysia. Sure, we have migrants right now. Migrants work in the best case. It does fill up a lot of people who it does fill up a lot of job discrepancies or like job opportunities right now. But then again, those migrants are brought here legally. They do have the travel documentation. They're brought here with they're brought here with documents, right? On government's end, right, if you bring that in, we already told you, it won't necessarily work because they're not protected, they don't have job security, the nations, or their own nations are going to be protected, and on their end, it's just completely not it. It's just not going to happen at all. And that's why you totally side with opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Opposition for your speech. To proceed with the next agenda, we will now continue our debate session for this round with the reply speech session. The reply speech shall be delivered first by the opposition team. Therefore, without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Him to deliver his speech and conclude the debate. Please welcome.
Okay. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let me clarify again. I did not say that I want ASEAN to become like EU. I'm just referring to this is because the motion states itself that you want an open border, and the best example of an open border would be the European Union. That's all I gave an example. I didn't say I want ASEAN to become EU. Very simply, let me just go through on what are the true comparatives over here. Let's go on the first one, which is the convenience versus sustainability. Right? On your side, yes, it is convenient. It's easier to get jobs, correct. Migration to other countries freely for jobs, and also it is faster without the need of documentation. But on their side, they did not want to engage on this, where they said there still be the need of documentation. It's just lesser paperwork, which I think it's false because again the motion says what does the motion say? Open border. All right. Okay. And we have actually proved on our side that it leads to stagnation, which again my first speaker and second speaker and third speaker we have mentioned many times. So I'll just talk about sustainability then. On our side, we have proven that it's more sustainable to maintain the status quo, which is not an open border, because there's an incentive for developing and lesser developed countries to create more job for the people, especially those countries with larger population that I mentioned before. And the thing is, this also requires people to train people for jobs if they do not have jobs within the country. So there's no need for them to sustain relying on other nations. All right, next thing is, which is why we prevent stagnation. The next question I want to ask is also, which sides better suits or which sides better answers the main goal or the interest of ASEAN, right? Very simply, ASEAN, again, like I mentioned, you have to lower trade barrier, moving into an economic union where trade barrier is zero, right? And they mentioned about how workers, they want to lower the barrier for migrants, which I don't think is right because you're not supposed to suit, you're not supposed to put products or also trade goods with labor. Next thing is that on our side, ASEAN maintains on status quo, which helps at least promote, like what we mentioned, there's no stagnation, and also it leads to promotion of jobs. Like what I mentioned just now earlier, the example was like Vietnam, where they seek other countries to help foreign direct investments into the country, like Apple and Coke. Right. The next thing is that which side promotes better economic benefits for ASEAN? On their side, it's very convenient to say that people can move around and get better jobs, but then they're refusing to engage on the fact that when a population of one country moves to another country to work, yes, the country that receives those people receives those benefits, but they refuse to answer on what happens to those countries in those countries that the people leave, right? Those countries that people leave, they'll be left in the dark with lesser people. Number one, cannot cover the workforce, even if they can find work, even if they start to create works for them. They have no people to suit because going to another country, we're paying more. The great examples, like I mentioned just now, Malaysia going to Singapore, where we can earn $3,000 compared to 3,000 ringgit over here, which is much more and greater. And the fact that I mentioned about how culture, I talk about culture, currency, and all these kind of things, it matters because when we talk about open borders, a lot of these things has to be integrated, a lot of these things has to be maintained, and a lot of these things have to be synchronized, which is impossible, like I mentioned, within ASEAN. Right. And next thing I'll talk about is on our side. Like I mentioned, which side promotes better economic benefits for ASEAN? On our side. On their side, they said that it is better because people fill up jobs and boost the economy. But on their side, they failed to let us know, or they failed to explain to us how does this help the countries that those people are leaving from. And only talk about countries people are leaving to, right? And with that, on our side, our side, we have actually proven how it benefits. Number one, member countries of ASEAN, whether it is developed, developing, or underdeveloped. And next thing, we also protect these people of labor. We also protect on our side. We're also able to protect the labor force which are coming from other countries. And again, we're talking about, and our side we also prove that how it's better to mitigate, how our side can mitigate the effects of exploitation from our side. And so with that, I rest my case. Don't vote for work visa. You vote for work permit today. Thank you.
Thank you to the representative from the opposition team for the reply speech. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Wu from the government team to proceed with their reply speech and conclude the debate. Please welcome.
Right, yes.
Paper number 1.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Right. In my speech, I would like to begin to state a few of the clashing points throughout this entire debate. Firstly, the points are the exploitation of the labor force, the migrants especially. Secondly, the aspects about documentation, and thirdly, the economic growth, right, economic growth as a whole. Right? So, on their side, they're trying to say that, right, because if they keep it as status quo, if they continue with status quo, right, is that it will obviously, like with their political unions and their ideas, that they're trying to make a situation where it will be will be better for everyone, right? For trying to talk about sustainability and the economic, because they're trying to think of both sides and sustainability and all that. And what we are saying here on government side is that, right, we are answering the problem that is faced right now by the countries, that there is a labor shortage, and that we have stated the fact that ASEAN is dependent on production as a whole. So we on government has stated that because there is a labor shortage as a whole, and because production, and that is why manpower is required, is that by siding with government, by allowing these open borders, is that you are able to answer the problem that is faced right now, which is more important and more imminent than the quote-unquote long-term sustainability that OP is trying to push on, without answering that there is a labor shortage right now that needs to be faced first and foremost. Next, we have talked about trying to foster better relationship because of the more lax laws and all that, and they have not really touched upon that. They're trying to go off on their tangent of the political union, and what we have said is that when you allow this more migration and such things and such occurrence, right, for workings and lower barriers to entry, assimilation and interaction will happen more naturally. And they are trying to say that no, the culture too different, right? This culture is too different. That no, there will be problems. Whereas if you see migrant workers now, they can speak pretty good Malay, right? The assimilation it can occur. It's more natural, right? And if we want to promote a better ASEAN, right, not just economically, where they are trying to state that rigid that ASEAN has been an economic union, and that they are trying to do this. They have been economic union. So why economic union? We are saying that there is, by siding with Gov, you have the potential for better integration as a whole, not just through the economy. And thirdly, on the effect of economic growth as a whole, what we're saying is that there is a problem. On the side of documentation and on the side of documentation, what we got on SiteGov, we have stated that with this lower barrier of entry, more people are able to actually get the documentation to allow governments to track where they're going, right? So, and we have stated all the plethora of benefits from that. It's like the competition of corruption, the taxation that can occur, and the reduction of mistreatment of the migrant workers, especially the illegal migrant workers as a whole. That is why the debate is won by Gov. Vote for Gov, not for ARP. That is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you to the representative from the governing team for the reply speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now reaching the end of our session today. Congratulations and thank you to all debaters from both teams for your wonderful, informative and fruitful speech. Thank you so much for your cooperation and for your time spent here in this debate. With that being said, this debate session is adjourned. We will now give some time to the adjudicators for the discussion of the results. I'd like to ask all debaters and audiences to wait outside of the room. Thank you so much and Assalamualaikum.
Motions you vetoed?
We vetoed the first motion.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's like I said.
We vetoed.
I think it was 132. Fine. Yeah. So this
we
was
vetoed
both
the
your
second.
second motions.
Yes.
You vetoed
No, this is our first motion.
Yeah, we
This is
vetoed
our first
each.
motion. We vetoed.
No,
the
we veto first, they
second.
veto second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, one.
Thanks for the debate, guys. I will just hand
Thanks,
back.
guys.
Okay, guys. I'm gonna do like this.
No, it's okay. One at a time.
Vibes. Wait, leave a stuff here. We come back here.
Wait,
Yeah, we'll come back.
results will be later. Now
Yes, you can come back after the judge.
Also, will be results.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
So, I'm the room.
Can we contact with anyone else? The audience?
No, you cannot say.